Right, Wayne, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pleased to be with you again. First of all, apologies from Lester Levy. The change of date for this meeting meant you caught him overseas, so that's why you got me again today.
Always a pleasure.
Can I just start saying how sad I was to see the article in the media yesterday on TV about Penny Hulse and the bullying she's getting through social media. It's a dreadful thing to see, particularly someone who's given so much to Auckland over the years. And I think it's particularly cowardly, given that it's anonymous.
Thank you for that. It's unfortunately it's not an isolated incident, and the female councillors get it way worse than the male councillors.
It is a health and safety issue that the board's very concerned about, AT as well, and a lot of our frontline staff get the same kind of thing, but it's perhaps more in your face because it's real. In the last 12 months, there's been over 160 physical abuses or threat of physical abuse for AT's frontline staff doing their job. We were talking about how we are dealing with that yesterday, and staff coming on board, particularly to do transport officer and parking officer, they go through 6 weeks of intensive training. A lot of that is around how to manage conflict and to be able to pull back to avoid conflict happening. And they are actually not allowed out on the road to speak until they have passed that training, because it's a real, I suppose it's one of the things that keeps me awake from time to time, because it's real time. And I link this to my experience in Rodney when I became CE after the government dismissed the council for being dysfunction, and that council organisation went through 12 months of media bashing because of that was going on. It gave the public a huge permission to abuse council staff, and that's what I found when I got there, and it took 6 months to rectify. And I'd just like to say that there is a correlation between AT bashing in the media and what our staff see on the ground. Somehow it gives people permission, or other people permission, to start doing what a small minority do. So, and this morning, had an issue through our call centre, and it was probably flippant, but the effect on staff is enormous. And that staff member was informed that the next mass shooting would be at AT. Yeah, so you can imagine the impact that has on staff in the organisation. So very sad to see what was happening with Penny, and also very concerned to see what's happening through our call centre today. The other thing I'd just like to flag for you is that yesterday the board looked at the paperwork we have to sign off to enable CRL contract to be entered into in July. There are 2 key points that I'd like to flag for you. One is there's a provision for unanimity between CRL, KiwiRail and AT in terms of the ongoing management of the contract. That's a critical principle for future successful operation, whole of life's cost effectiveness and that kind of thing, to be at the forefront of the delivery of this project. And the other key issue is the resourcing of AT and KiwiRail to fulfil their role, because that's not confirmed yet, and I know those issues will come before you in the next month or so. We had a visit from the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee at the beginning of the week. They went to CRL, and they also they went somewhere else as well. Anyway, they asked us for a presentation on ATAP, and I think they went away with a clear perspective that about the scale of growth in Auckland. The forecast growth in Auckland is greater than the rest of New Zealand put together. I think we gave them a good impression about the progress being made against ATAP. but also left a message that the need for ongoing investment is not over, and there's more to do. Before I hand over to Shane, I'd just like to say I'm very much looking forward to participating in the workshop Monday, to prepare the ground for how we do the next wave of major interventions in Auckland successfully together, because there is a lot to do and we need to work better together to get those on the ground. So having said that, I'd like to hand over to Shane.
Thank you for those words, and especially the words regards basically social media and direct harassment, and we understand Auckland Transport and the bears a bigger brunt, but it's like the people who deal with dogs in our area, and needless to say it's now our parks people relating to Kari dieback and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, and that's where Councillor Holes has had it in the neck from, you know, regards dogs, regards Kari dieback, regards closing tracks, and regards bucket sports. Anyway, sure. James, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Wayne. What I'd just briefly like to cover is two things. First of all, this is one of the last opportunities, I think, to get in front of you and talk about road safety performance for 2018. I wanted to give you that information before that goes more widely and publicly. Secondly, again, because this is one of the last opportunities we get to speak to you, is just give you an update on the speed limits bylaw, which you would have anticipated. There may have been a decision by now, but I want to give you an update on that. So in terms of, I will arrange for a pack to be sent to you after this morning's meeting about road safety performance for the 2018 calendar year, which is part of the SOI targets. But, and it's always hard talking about road safety performance, particularly when you have an improvement, because it still leaves a number of people on our roads that are dying or seriously injured. So when I talk about this, just have that in your mind. But compared with 2017, the 2018 year, there were 10 lives saved and 161 serious injuries prevented. Sadly, there were still 54 dead and 595 seriously injured, which is above the 5-year baseline still, despite that 22% annual reduction. The good news from 2018 is that across all sub-regions there's been a decrease in the number of young driver deaths and serious injuries, and we continue to partner strongly with police and other key agencies. Red light running DSI reduced by 54% from 37 to 17, so we particularly thank the Mayor and Councillor Darby for their support in mobilising police around the backup system for that, and clearly that is having an impact across our region. Motorcycle DSI reduced by 20% overall, but remains high in some rural and urban police areas. In 2018, there was a 57% annual reduction in the number of DSI crashes where alcohol and other drugs were reported as a factor. This is, from our perspective, clearly driven by a 25% increase in the number of compulsory breath tests undertaken by police. So the partnership and collaboration with police is having a positive effect in Auckland, but obviously we will always be advocating for more support from the New Zealand Police. In terms of, I talked about red light camera, the reduction in DSI, the number of fixed safety cameras led to the detection of an extra 230,000 speed offences and 5,000 red light camera offences. So you can see that that uplift in offences is a good lead indicator for improvement in DSI. Obviously, we undertook a large number of high-profile road safety communication campaigns, and this has obviously escalated the importance of road safety across our community. We also delivered 85 safety engineering improvements in 2018, along with some speed management changes on rural arterials and outside urban schools. Where is work still needed, or where is the most high-profile work still needed? Unfortunately, the areas, the local board areas of Waitemata, Ōrākei and Hibiscus and Bays local boards, despite there being a 22% decrease overall, those three local board areas increased by, respectively, Waitemata 31% increase in DSI, Hibiscus and Bays 36%, and Ōrākei by 25%. In terms of DSI in 2018, despite the overall improvement. Rodney and Franklin, the DSI remained relatively unchanged on the unforgiving high-speed rural roads and contributed to 22% of all DSI across the region in 2018. It's 155 people. Māori and Pacific road users are still overrepresented, even though the absolute numbers have decreased in 2018. And while vulnerable road users, the DSI decreased slightly in 2018, it actually increased as an overall percentage of all DSI to 47%. So, as I said, that's a very quick skate over DSI performance. We know it's a key focus area in the Auckland Plan, in ATAP, and it's specifically called out as a hypothetical project in RFT. The key things I would say to you about that is the plan, which is based on the safe system approach. The results in 2018 suggest the plan's a good one. We've had 1 year. Yes, road safety results can be variable from year to year, but I think it gives us confidence that the plan that you have, in terms of strategically, given us leadership and direction on is the right one. We thank you for that leadership, and you know, those 10 deaths and the 161 serious injuries that prevented, I think you should take some appreciation from the community and from ourselves for the investment that you have enabled and the leadership you've shown in terms of road safety. In that context, if I can quickly move to the safe speeds, or the proposed bylaw, and I say proposed, underlined in bold. We have, as you know, we went to consultation in March this year. There's a number of slides there that you can look at. We went to consultation in March this year. We deliberately went seeking to get to have as high awareness across the community as possible. In fact, the communications activity that we undertook in the second half of last year, February, and even through the period of the consultation, those different communications, that different collateral, those different approaches reached a target audience of over 7 million. And as a result, we got responses of over 11,000, around 11,700 submissions. Well over 98% of those were from individuals. And as a result, that's the highest, apart from the Regional Land Transport Plan, that is the highest number of submissions on a proposal that we have ever had. All elements of the proposal have been opened to feedback, and as a result of that overwhelming response, we are taking a little longer to consider those submissions and how we move forward. One other thing I'd say to you about the submissions is the proposal had around 770 kilometres of roads proposed across the region for reductions in speed limits. We've actually received requests for another 870 across the region. We're not going to deal with those 870. We can't actually tackle that as part of this bylaw because we didn't consult on it. But it just shows the level of interest and the kind of what we're having to deal with in terms of the consultation. Some of the feedback's is quite generic about the concept overall, but much of it is actually on a road by road basis in terms of that feedback, and that's what our team we've despite the high level of interest and the high level of submissions, we've actually ramped up resourcing to try and actually address that. The one thing that the proposal had is that the proposal, if it was to be approved by the AT board, it would go into effect on the 20th of August. What I'd say to you here today is, because we are taking the time to listen and consider, we will need to go back to the board in the coming weeks or months to reconsider that date for implementation. I think I would say to you today that date of implementation is highly unlikely. In the interest of time, I won't go through slide by slide, Chair, but happy to take any questions on that, or obviously on the report and the letter, the covering letter that we submitted with the report as part of third quarter performance.
Is there anything that Mark would like to highlight in the financials? No? All right. Councillor Filipato.
Thank you. Just a question, firstly, on the submissions. Shane, you said it was about from individuals. Were they pro forma? If so, how many pro forma? Because, you know...
There is a mix of, people were able to submit online, free text type arrangement. It was actually quite simple in terms of the questions that were asked. There wasn't extensive, as well as they were able to submit written submissions, and obviously. Members of the board sat in on hearings on around, and I'll get these dates wrong, but around the 16th and 17th of April this year. So we had 2 days of hearings.
Were there any of the submissions that you mentioned around individuals, pro forma submissions, put in, all of them saying that just end up just getting the signature? Were any of those, or were they from...
I need to revert to you on the answer to that one, Councillor.
And look, can you just update our hub with your last slide, because it's not on here? That's all. Thanks, because there's some information on there that I am interested in.
Sure.
Yeah, not to thank you.
No,
that's self-explanatory. There's one more before that, after that. I think you had was the...
Yeah,
that.
So don't take this as conclusive, but that's some of the themes that are coming through.
But at least it gives us an idea.
Yes, it does.
And that's all I'm asking, is
Yeah.
just to put that on here, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Newman next, sorry.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, if it was up to me, I'd take every speed hump and traffic calming measure around the region, and I'd like to have them all in my ward, and I'll happily absorb the lot, frankly, because I think we need to balance the road. Me first. Balance the corridor to ensure the safety of pedestrians, which is just as important as the amenity of people who want to drive on roads. What I wanted to do was to just request, if I may, in the strategic focus area asset management. I'm aware that the work that is taking place with the University of Auckland around the criticality framework, I think that given the increase in VKT, as well as the change in the vehicles that are on the roads, the big heavy trucks, particularly in the south, changes in climate and the impact that weather is having on the condition of the road surfaces, as well as a better understanding of the legacy assets, the local roading assets that you have inherited, that there needs to be obviously a timely recalibration of the road renewal contracts. And I acknowledge that Tracy Buchan's here and she's been doing great work on Parika Road, but there'll be a lot more coming, I'm sure. So, can I just get some update on timing for the changes to those contracts? I know that the work's begun around going out to market on that, but that some of those big roading contracts, particularly in the south, are critical, and they are currently under severe financial constraint, and that will need to be addressed. So, what's the update on that process?
So there is an initial review being done, but what we would like to do, if time permits, is actually have a workshop with all councillors on how we would, a proposal for moving forward and give you the opportunity to give us your views on how we might move forward with those contracts. It has been we've had an initial workshop with our board of directors, but we would like to do that with councillors and political representatives, because we are very consciously aware that the majority of people that use our network are on our roads every day.
When you say moving forward, is that about changing the budgets within the existing envelope between sub-regions, or within existing activities within AT to better address that, or changing the overall scope of the budget with a further bid like coming later on? What are you talking about?
So the workshop we would like to have with you is around how the current contracts work, where we see areas for improvement in the future contracting model. It would not go to discussions around budget at this point in time.
What's the timing for that workshop that you're
We were hoping to have it late July.
Yep.
Tentatively, I understand there's a slot in the diary on July the 31st. We need to confirm that with the CCO unit in council.
Mayor Goff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Shane, for that presentation. I've got 4 questions. I'll just take them one at a time. It's obviously great news that we've got 10 fewer deaths on the road in the last year, and 161 fewer serious injuries. But I just want to test out how much we can talk about cause and effect. We went up by 73% in the previous 3 years, or 70 to, I've heard different figures actually, some 77, some 78, and the rest of the country went up by 23%. So maybe we're just, we're evening it out. But before we can claim credit for the drop in the death and the serious injury toll, we need to be able to show that there is some cause and effect between what we've done and the less impact of casualties on the road. Can we actually do that?
Sorry, it's a very good question. It's very difficult to isolate any one particular thing when you are taking a safe system approach. Yep. But there is, what I would say to you is that in a number of other jurisdictions where you have lead indicators, such as the ones we're talking about, so where those lead indicators are heading in the direction that they are, such as the red light camera, the number of offences, where the number of compulsory breath tests are increasing, then you traditionally or you usually see a reduction in DSI.
Yeah, no, I accept that the red light and the reduction in DSI from alcohol, drugs, you can relate those to specific actions. But what were the actions that we might claim responsibility for between 2017 and 2018 that might have made a difference, apart from red lights and greater enforcement of drink driving?
So clearly the education campaigns and communication campaigns that are being undertaken. I'm not sure if there's a lot of, there's small initiatives being undertaken. I think there's something like, Andrew will correct me if I'm wrong, but around 45 pedestrian crossings that have been, a number of them have already been completed, that have been upgraded. There is a young driver education program where we It's quite simple, but where we encourage parents and their teenagers to come along to a movie theatre. They see a movie after they've been shown an educational piece around safe driving around the region. Even things as it becomes harder as Your Worship when we talk about direct correlation, but things like the Home Free initiative, which we undertook just prior to Christmas, on the Friday night that is traditionally the worst for drink driving in our region, where we provided free public transport to get home. All those sorts of initiatives, very hard to make a direct correlation, but that's why we have to take a safe system approach which focuses on all elements of road safety.
I could add to that is that, I'm not sure we could give you a list, but there are examples of dangerous intersections that have received a treatment, and you've gone from a number of serious injuries or even death over a period of time to zero over the last 2 or 3 years. So if you wanted some examples of specific interventions that have worked, bit by bit, I'm sure the team can give you so.
I think that would be really helpful, Wayne, if you could get that to us. The second question is, I think everybody around the table is aware that on road safety, and particularly on the speed area, that if you don't carry your community with you, you don't succeed. And it's always difficult to know exactly what the wider cross-section of the community feels, because the submissions are done by people that are interested enough to make that effort, but they don't necessarily represent the cross-section. And it may be that we underestimate those that say that we should have lower speed limits, or maybe we overestimate them. But I wondered whether you'd given any consideration to taking some of your major proposals and polling independently on a cross-section of people rather than the self-selected people who will tend to make submissions, just to get an idea of what the wider community feels about things like speed limits.
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. We haven't done that to this point, but your concern, we have commissioned a piece which looks at, based on the submissions we've got, what does that tell us about what I might term the silent majority. It may not be quite what correlates to what you're talking about, but we are very conscious of looking at that, because you do tend to get in some consultations the views of the different ends of the spectrum. No, we haven't looked at polling at this point in time, but we are very conscious of the issue that you've raised.
I think, given the total amount that we're spending, what are we doing, 900 million on road safety? I think just finding out where the majority of people, whether it's silent majority or not, are thinking on that issue might be a good indicator, because sometimes we've found that there's been a noisy group of people that are opposed to something, and we go out and we consult with the wider public, and actually we find most of them in that community are actually for it. So, I mean, having that moral high ground of knowing what people think and being responsive to the public, I think is really important. The third thing, I'm really interested in your figure about the 57% reduction in DSI from alcohol and drugs, and a 25% increase in the number of breath tests, because I've seen parliamentarians on TV in the last 3 weeks saying exactly the opposite, that there has been a reduction in roadside testing. And I just wanted to test that with you, because I'm getting really mixed messages, but your figures demonstrate that in the Auckland region, there is a 25, in the last year, is it? There's been a 25% increase in blood alcohol and breath testing.
Correct. So the how that is measured, just to give you the granular kind of insight around that, it goes through an annual calibration process of how often the CBDC compulsory breath test devices are used, and that number has increased from 317,000 in 2017 to 398,000 in 2018.
And that's in the Auckland region, Shane?
Correct.
Okay.
Tamaki Makaurau.
That's the number of breath tests,
Correct.
and that's from police figures?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I think that's really good, but it worries me again that there's misinformation out there, because I'd assumed the exact opposite, from what I read in the media, and I know I shouldn't believe what I read in the media. The last question is, as I understand it, 25% of DSIs are caused by speed, which indicates that there are a whole lot of other areas, and sometimes people are kind of seeing us only focused on speed, and we need to be indicating, well, this is a breakdown of the causes of a DSI, and what are we doing in each area? And, you know, it might be the stuff like that Wayne was talking about, dangerous intersections, etc. But I'd kind of like to see some written material on what we're doing across the broad spread of causes of DSI, because some of them will be people not wearing seatbelts. And now we don't do anything on seatbelts in AT, I presume, but maybe the government does. But just a breakdown of these are the causes, and this is what we're doing in each area to address the causes, because otherwise people think we're focused only on speed and we're ignoring those other factors.
We're happy to provide that to you, and we are, even things like seatbelts, while we've always said that this is a crisis that we cannot solve on our own. We need our partners at the table. So I know the team are advocating strongly with police around, just as we want to see the number of compulsory breath tests increase, we want to see increases in the number of seatbelt checks increase. So yes, we're happy to provide that.
Right. Councillors, remember this is also a Finance and Performance Committee meeting, so there are other aspects besides road safety. If you have questions relating to that, it's important as well. Councillor Simpson, Councillor Darby, Councillor Casey, Councillor Cashmore, and then Councillor Hills. Councillor Simpson.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, it would not be appropriate for me to start my questions without saying how disappointed I was what you said at the very beginning. I think that is incredibly disturbing and not acceptable. So I can only apologise. I don't know why I'm apologising from, I just feel for you actually. I think that's something that must feel absolutely awful and must really hurt your whole morale within your organisation. So thank you for sharing, but I think it's certainly a terrible thing that's happened. I'll go from that terrible negative to a wonderful positive. Your public transport figures and results are outstanding, so congratulations on that. I also want to congratulate you on how you have handled post the St Heliers public meeting and the work that's happening there with regards to the working groups that have been set up and the way that's been handled over the last little while. Now, I am going to ask you just a couple of little questions. One is a finance question, and that is your operating expenditure. Do you believe that will be on budget by the end of the next quarter?
Yes, we do. So the net surplus deficit from operations at the end of the March quarter, we were 28 million ahead, principally due to timing differences. We expect at the end of the financial year will be approximately 15 million ahead, but important to note 12 million of that is depreciation. So on a cash basis, we expect to come in just above or inside our budget for the year.
Okay.
3 million favourable.
That's really good, because it is a finance meeting. In your strategic focus area key projects, your first highlight is the downtown program enabling works completed over the Christmas break. That work is obviously still ongoing. That wasn't all completed over the Christmas break. Can you just clarify that for me? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So it was the enabling works done over the Christmas break and into January. What we're now commencing is rebuilding of the seawall.
Right.
The resource consents have been approved for those, and that's the main works now cracking on.
You've got that down there. I was just checking that. It sort of reads as if you've finished all the downtown works over the Christmas period. That's all. That's great. May I please have the latest safety figures for the Ōrākei ward that you've quoted? I'd like a copy of those when you've got a minute. And finally, bit high level, what's keeping you awake at night? What is going to be, come the end of the year and working as we do into the next year, what's going to be your biggest worry? Apart from St Heliers. Not allowed to say that.
I think we covered it actually the last time we were here. I think we have a huge opportunity to keep shifting people towards public transport and active modes, and we're going to run out of puff because there's just not the resources to put into it. I mean, it's, well, we've got big investments coming, like CRL and Eastern Busway and the like. It's just keeping things going in the next 5 years, and a lot of that is really fine-grained, semi-operational stuff. I'll give you an example. We're working closely with the Newmarket developer to put their over 2,000 staff onto public transport. How do we manage the traffic in the opening weeks and those kinds of things? And that's opening up a whole lot of opportunities to put in place something that's enduring and adds to our shifts. So the answers are often not big bang. They are quite fine-grained, community by community, location by location, but it's a lot of people time and effort to put those in place. And so in terms of keeping on a roll, it's just, for me, it's just resources to keep the momentum going, and because I'm really pleased with the work that's been happening around transport safety, and a lot of the things we're seeing is, yes, the front wave has been improved, and enforcement has given us our first tranche of improvement, but that hasn't come around by accident. It comes around by a huge collaborative effort between AT staff, NZTA staff, police and the like. A lot of stuff going on in the background that starts to add dividends. So there's a lot of good things happening, but where I see a gap at the moment is just keeping the pressure on getting people to shift modes. Yeah.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to run through these pretty quickly because I think we've got a lot to cover. Incredible 11,000 submissions. That's testament to your engagement team. Terrific. Just on that, I'm looking at social media. It's amazing now when you just see a sponsored pop-up that's got the AT logo on it, or Go AT, or Go by Mark's Bus Services, or whatever it is. There's something popping up all the time. So you're starting, I remember we talked about this probably a year, 18 months ago. We talked about marketing versus advertising, and you've clearly stepped it up in the marketing space. You're using platforms like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and you're using mentors. I think one of the All Blacks, I can't remember his name, that's how memorable it is, but I'm sure you'll tell us. And then you're using influencer marketing as well, which is the fastest growing area of that platform marketing, I understand. And that's what is drawing out this incredible response. Is that, or is it something else?
Again, it's often difficult to draw a direct kind of linkage, but one of the reasons we set up a customer experience function last year was to actually put more of the organisation's focus on driving the aspirations that are in the Auckland Plan, and secondly, to increase responsiveness of the organisation to the community and our customers. It's fair to say that Vanessa and her team have picked up the baton on that, in terms of some of the work that was done really well previously in pockets across the organisation. They are taking a very coordinated, well thought out approach, and to Wayne's point about what keeps them awake at night, I'm not concerned about us being able to continue to deliver growth in PT numbers well above population growth. I just, some of that fine-grained actual delivery, I think we will see growth continue through the period until some of the big major capital projects are delivered. I just, the product, the quality of PT in particular is good quality, excusing when we have service failures like this morning, but generally, the customer satisfaction stats tell us that it's working. There's a real opportunity here.
Okay. Just quickly to some other questions. Just on, back to road safety, or continuing with road safety, you highlighted 3 boards up there from memory, Watamata, Ōrākei, Bays Hibiscus,
yeah.
and Bays. And so your evidence base on DSIs says that that's where you need to go, and you are going, you're focusing, they are priority areas, and you had 10 boards respond to your road safety bylaw invitation. Can you just tell us, are you getting the support of those boards, backing your determination to address those skating DSI numbers in their board areas?
So, yes, we had 10. I would say the level of support from all 10 was generally, so yes, supportive. There are some conditions around some of that support. The Deputy Mayor recently convened a meeting with some of those particular local boards, and they were keen to see that the proposal continue. And I'm not sure that everybody's aware, but the Hibiscus Bays local board in particular is making a financial contribution to some of the town centre changes in Mairangi Bay and some other places. So that gives you a sense of the support for it. Clearly, there's some issues that the local boards, when I say there's some conditions around, in a couple of instances around that support, we need to if this proposal is to go forward, then we need to work with them. But yes, the support is positive.
Fantastic. And of course, we've got the new fund for them to tap into as well, so that syncs nicely. And lastly, Chair, because you did remind us this is a financial report, the NZTA relationship, and there's clearly on page 54, there's signal that there's still a bit of a slow movement of progression of some major projects. I was a little bit surprised. I didn't know that we actually don't get support for acquisition of land until the project actually starts. Is that correct? That seems quite a delay and a burden on our balance sheet compared to theirs. So can you just give us a sense of where we're at with the NZTA relationship against the background that it was a bit laboured 3 months ago?
I'd say the relationship's good. There's a lot of work obviously going on, and we've clearly flagged in the past that obviously there's a 50-50 funding commitment in ATAP, and we're working through with both NZTA and MOT to resolve those issues. There's a lot of constructive conversation at the moment. Some of the points you allude to is the funding model in place. We'd love to see some simplification to it, and there's potentially some nearer term fixes and ideally a longer term solution. But the one you point out around property purchases, often we acquire a piece of land, we may then chop it into 2 pits, and only a portion goes into the, say, a roading project. It's at that point we would normally get NZTA funding for a portion of the land, and that was part of the traditional reason. But that's one of the areas that we would like to get funded at the time of purchase, even for the portion we will retain. Other pieces relate to, for example, our business technology projects. Typically, they haven't been funded. There's good progress, but there's still challenges that we're working through.
Councillor Casey.
Wayne, first of all, how you opened today affected me too. I hope that the person who made that phone call, you've tracked the number and you've forwarded it on to the police. Can you just assure me you're following up?
Yes, we have already, and police are following up.
Excellent. I think that every comment, every threat made in social media or by telephone should be likewise followed up. I think there should be zero tolerance from now on. Pets on trains, thank you very much, Wayne. Please transmit my infinite thanks to the board for allowing the trial on trains. Looking forward to the trial on buses, which I understand is just hanging about for later in the year. I would also like to say thank you to Wally Thomas and John Nottage for their support. That's the comms people who gave me enormous support over the last week. So that's great stuff. In response, next week we are going to the local government conference. We're taking with us your remit on parking on berms, which requires a change to the rules from 2004. What was interesting to me was that beaches are the same, that you can't actually enforce parking on beaches unless you have a sign every 100 metres. It's crazy. So I'm looking forward to the support of New Zealand for that. So thank you. 2 questions. One relates to our climate emergency declaration and what your plans are to, you have a wee bit in your report about climate change. And my second is one I always raise, and it's, I think the secret to success in the future is the kids of New Zealand, and I think the Travel Wise programme is one that is very dear to my heart. And you have a limit on to 250 schools, and I wonder if always are we doing enough? And how many other schools should we be adding to that list year on year? We don't have a target, we just have that ceiling. So I'm interested in your view on that. I would take the target, I would take the ceiling off and just try and get as many schools on board as possible. And I know there'll be a limit to that, but I'm interested in your response.
I think there's always more you can do in terms of getting to young people first before they form their habits. There's anecdotal stuff coming through that people leaving school don't leave with the intention of buying a car as much as they did, you know, and those kinds of things. Again, I mean, that's a resourcing issue, and it's a balance of how much you do around each one. I mean, 250 contact with 250 schools is a pretty high number. I mean, the team continually looks at where can we get best improvement or best shift, and I mean the whole notion of you know, improving active modes and access to public transport and safety. A lot of it comes down to working with the communities locally. Schools is a good focus for that, and you know, local boards are well aware of that as much as town centres. So I think I can assure you, if there's, you know, if it looks as though we're better off putting our resources into working with schools more than we currently are, we'll certainly take that on board and work with it.
We clearly have heard councillors, quite apart from the decision last week, the desire to accelerate things like electric buses, black carbon in Queen Street, all those things we've heard that. We are pushing ahead and seeing what we can do to accelerate the things that we can do as Auckland Transport. For example, at the end of July, we are looking to have a forum with all the electric bus operators, suppliers, to see how we can quickly transition, or more quickly transition, to electric buses. There are a number of other areas where we are having conversations about how we as Auckland Transport can promote actions or interventions which support the aspirations of councillors and governing body.
Councillor Hills.
Thank you. And yeah, just want to say also those comments are horrendous. I've been working with Ollie from the Head of Health and Safety for a while on a program. They've finally got funding to look at promoting better behaviour again, you know, that our staff and sometimes politicians are facing out there, whether it's verbal, physical. We've got a huge rise in that. So I'm not sure if your stats are combined with council. So just want to see if you're getting involved with that, because it is a bit of, you know, turning it back on others. This kind of behaviour is not okay, and also will limit actually what kind of democracy we end up having and contact and consultation and different things if those kind of things are becoming a higher risk for staff and contractors. So just going straight to the other issues, on finance, I'm still, obviously it's great, we're seeing huge changes already on the safety issues. The amount of raised crossings and things like community are already really stoked in our community that what has been put outside schools and some of the town centres already. But I have some concerns around things like how we could maybe do better around things like full rehabs and upgrades. You know, I feel the policy is still around just like renewal like for like. Like I really hope we're combining budgets a bit better around, you know, should we be putting a cycleway in or even just some safety? I know we're slightly widening footpaths if we can, but are we always looking for the best outcome and the best use of money on those full rehabs and road upgrades instead of retrofitting them a couple of years later again? I think that would be a good financial way to get some more safety stuff happening. And the cycleways, so both on safety and the climate action, the climate emergency, that seems like a clear win. How can we make sure we're getting even higher than the 10 kilometres a year safety issues? Because the speed are one thing, but actually providing space for people is another, especially when we're getting that massive increase of those cycling numbers. The other sort of all combined, we have had 2 this week, people hit on crossings just on the shore, and it's becoming a more common thing. So I think there is an issue around speed, but also that those crossings weren't raised. So I guess we need to look more quickly at improving the current things we've already got.
Several questions there.
In relation to the pedestrian crossings and people being hit, we do know that approximately 20% of people or pedestrians that are involved in our DSR numbers those accidents happen at existing pedestrian crossings, which is why this year we've rolled out the MAPI, the Mass Action Pedestrian Improvement Program. And as Shane alluded to, we've targeted 45 crossings. I think the ones you're referring to clearly are not in that list. Those 45 are targeted at pedestrian crossings where we have a history of death or serious injury accidents. That's the 45 that we've targeted this year is not it, but it's what we can afford to do and can actually manage to do in the financial year. That program continues into next year and the following year, so we will absolutely be looking at where the risk lies and focusing on targeting interventions to those pedestrian concerns.
Okay, right. We have Councillor Cooper, then Councillor Fletcher, and then back to Councillor Newman.
3 things. One is when we talk about reduction in young people needing to buy cars, I think that might be happening, but it's in the inner suburbs and it's in the places where there's very good public transport. But we have numerous suburbs, particularly in the northwest, where there isn't any. So you just even have to go to Hobsonville Point to see how many cars are squeezed in their driveways, in their garages, all over the streets because they're still buying cars. So I think we can't pretend that young people are not buying cars. They still are because they can't get around otherwise. Crossings. In terms of the law around crossings, is it true that the pedestrian has to give way until it's clear, right? Whereas it seems to me that people think that you can just walk across without even looking and people have to stop. And I wonder whether that is the issue around pedestrian crossings. People think that they're legally allowed to just bowl out in front of a car, which happens to a lot of us, I'm sure we see it. Is there some merit in actually getting people to understand the rule again? Because in some countries it's you just walk out and you have to stop, and I think here it's just you have to wait till it's clear, and that's the confusion. That's that one.
Through the chair, that's not entirely correct. So the law here and the road user rule at zebra crossings and in shared spaces, the pedestrian has right of way.
So even just bowling out in front without making sure the person can stop in time.
There's a common sense consideration, but at a zebra crossing and in shared spaces, the law requires the vehicle driver to give way to the pedestrian.
Good to know. Good. So maybe we should be educating everyone what it actually is, because I think there is confusion. And now the other one is around Lincoln Road and corridor improvement stuff and really the regional fuel tax. I mean, I voted for that on the understanding that there would be a local benefit, and the safety improvements, I still can't work out what they are because I still get a map with squiggly lines. I can't even say to people, oh, this was done, that was done, because it's not really properly told to the councillors. And I have to bear the brunt of you voted for that, and I can't even tell anybody what we've done. So I would still waiting for that after nearly a year. I don't want another map with a squiggly lines on that don't actually tell me what street and what was actually done. And the other thing is, in terms of Lincoln Road, that was the one big ticket item that we were told, if you vote for this, you will get that. And I understand the constraints, and I understand the NZTA, we had a contract with them to deliver the first part of that, and then they've reneged on that, and we've waited months to get the money back, which we already gave them. But now we don't have enough NZTA subsidy. So that's my understanding after getting an update. I guess my question is, how are we going to fulfill on our promises to people, you know, that we said they'd get from fuel tax? You know, it is just really distressing. I keep getting people asking me, when is it going to happen? And I also know that my fellow councillors asked for a kind of, let's have another look at Lincoln Road, but we do agree on doing Central Park, Triangle and Lincoln as that stitch. We just can't seem to get it done, and it was going to start last year, and it still might happen in 18 months. So I guess that for me, you might be able to answer me online, but it is a big issue in West Auckland because it's the only thing we're getting that's tangible from the fuel tax, and it'll be like 4 years away from when we voted for it.
Mark?
Through the chair, so you're correct, there has been a number of iterations and rounds of discussions with NZTA around funding. You will also be aware that the proposal was questioned, I think, by yourself and another councillor in terms of the actual look and feel and aesthetics of the proposal. So we've been reviewing that. Also, how can we minimise land take on both sides of the corridor? I think the team are probably getting near to actually having something to come back with. So maybe I could offer a briefing for yourself in the next few weeks. I would
really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, I've got Councillor Fletcher, then Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions relate to the quarterly performance period. What I'm really wanting to know is, and get my head around deliverability, is what projects within the period that we're looking at within ATAP have actually been commenced.
Councillor, I think we'd need to revert to you in terms of, can I clarify the question though before we do? Are you looking for those that actually commenced in that quarter?
No, I'd like to take it a wee bit further. Yes, we are here today to look at that quarter. So I'd really like to have any evidence of those projects that look that can tick a box in terms of all of those things in capital expenditure you need to know are going to be in place, that we can actually are going to see deliverable. So it might be some of the work stream that's taken place in this quarter that under consideration, but might look like they could get commenced in the next quarter. Where I'm trying to understand, because this is a finance committee, and I want to understand within how we might measure the success of ATAP in terms of how we measure it against those projects that are going to be deliverable. Because it strikes me that sometimes it's put to us that we have our problems are funding based, but I think sometimes our problems are just the capacity for deliverability. And I haven't quite been able to gauge whether that difficulty that I perceive is one of AT or whether it's one of NZTA. So I would be very interested if you could give me a status report on the ATAP projects that we have in our LTP and what is the probability of those getting off the ground in the next financial year.
And I think we'd all be interested in that, and also an explanation of where your 15% non-delivery of capex for this year, where does that lie as well? Because as you're indicating there, you're going to be 15% behind by year end. So, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Just quickly, just picking up on the pedestrian crossings, does Auckland Transport, do they have a mechanism to fine people when they break the law, when people are crossing the road, busy pedestrian crossing, and you have people on bicycles and scooters that are scooting and cycling across when people are trying to walk across the road and almost get hit and could end up in hospital for many, many months because of this illegal activity? Do we have a mechanism? Because it is breaking the law. It happens every day. We could go and have a look and just go and have a look up there right now. And I bet as people are crossing the road, there'll be people that are zipping past you on scooters and push bikes while you're trying to walk across the road. Have we got a mechanism to start fining people? And what is the fine? And when are we going to start doing it? Thank you.
Through the chair, the answer to that's pretty simple, unfortunately. There is no mechanism for AT or council to enforce that behaviour or activity. That is something that falls to the New Zealand Police for enforcement.
I guess because we're talking here about public safety and Auckland Transport and public safety and the police and everything, and I think this is something that is quite big, and I think the ACC, I think if we, every week we could find out how many people have actually been injured because of this. So this is something, there must be a mechanism, and we must be able to do something about this. It should be quite easy, even if just in the city or something like that, maybe we just had some volunteers that went out there and just sort of, excuse me, please walk the bike across the road, walk the scooter across the road, because health and safety is really, really something really, really important, and it's something I have people ringing me about all the time, and I personally know a lot of people that have been injured by a cyclist biking into them or a scooter, and yeah.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. It's obviously something we are also very concerned about, as is the Mayor, and the Mayor has written to the Minister, and as has AT, the Chair and myself. There is a package of legislation or draft legislation which has been due to be consulted on by government. We haven't seen it as yet. But that is the pathway forward, and clearly, as I say, it's something that we are particularly interested in advocating upon.
It's a good question, and it's a good one to flag, because I think as we get more pedestrianised, this thing becomes a bigger issue. And I think you could add to your list people walking and looking at their phone. It's unbelievable the number of people that step off the curb and they're just doing this, so that's as much as an education issue as anything.
Yeah. Yes, we certainly don't want to go back to traffic cops. They were never particularly well liked. We trust the police more. Councillor Newman, do you have a second?
Yeah, last one. I think the last one, am I? Thank you. Yeah, I had a question regarding NZTA business casing projects and strangling them, but just before I do say that, I just want to make the point that the climate change emergency isn't just about transformation, it's also about resilience of our existing infrastructure. That's obviously going to be something I'm sure that you'll be talking about when we talk about the road network. But with respect to NZTA, what is the progress of this, what appears to be some sort of standoff with NZTA, effectively business casing projects to a standstill, which may, I think, be contributing to some of the problems that maybe is affecting Councillor Cooper's and others about not being able to deliver on ATAP because, frankly, the other half of the relationship isn't progressing as well as it should, that NZTA, that are critical as a funding partner, simply not being able to progress forward because of a business case requirement that just doesn't seem to be concluding. It just seems to be a circular exercise. Are you able to comment on that?
Probably the way I describe the business casing process is there's good intent at the top levels within NZTA. As we head more down in the organisation, there's it's quite a rules-based model that they have, and so things tend to get stuck as they go lower down in the organisation. So we're working with them at the moment to look at ways of helping unblock the system, so to speak, putting the funding issues to one side. And NZTA have been doing some internal work around looking to improve their business casing process and actually engaging with us on that.
Well, what's the timing of that? Because that just seems like a pretty long lunch. I mean, great that you're doing this work, but I'm concerned that you're having to do the work with them to try and appears to be improving their knowledge base so that they can do their job. They are the state funding half the project, and if they don't have the ability to do that within the bowels of their organisation, then the whole country's buggered.
We don't have any dates as such, but we are already, not just with business casing, but in other areas, we've already seen improvements in terms of their approach. For example, if I can give you an example, the funding for one of the projects as part of the downtown program went to their board on around the 7th or 8th of May. We had confirmation the next day. Previously, we would have had to have waited until the next board meeting where that got approved, and then it's only then that we would have found out that we had funding. So there's the business casing element, but there's a number of processes that are being streamlined, and it won't be the benefits all get delivered once everything is complete. We're already seeing improvements from our perspective around unblocking the system.
Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, I agree. I think there's a lot of good work happening to try and uncork and deal with it. But if I could there is a fundamental mismatch because we've had ATAP around for a few years now, and what that's resulted in is an agreed plan between Auckland and Wellington and the government about what should happen when, and and it's multimodal and it's linked to land use planning and all that kind of stuff. So you get this highly integrated plan. And then the government minister puts out a government policy statement that says so many 100 million go to this activity class, so much goes into that activity class, and it gives NZTA the responsibility to allocate those buckets on national priority, not Auckland priority. So Auckland projects have to compete with projects from all around the country, whether it's a state highway or a public transport project. So the effect of the GPS and NZTA's rule book is to totally disintegrate or disaggregate Auckland's integrated plan.
Yep.
And that's the fundamental issue that's in place. And so one good thing for council to think about is, do you want to reinforce the ATAP model, or do you want to go back to the national prioritising model? I suggest that Auckland be best served by continuing to develop and evolve and make and reinforce that ATAP approach is the right way to go and calls the other rules to change to suit it. It's a strategic decision that you need to get behind one way or another.
I think
Yeah, look, thank you. I mean, I didn't really want to delve into this because I know where this is going to head, and that is there's some real issues with the way in which rewriting the GPS for an organisation that frankly I don't think was geared to deliver on a radically recalibrated GPS. So having rewritten the GPS, how long does it take an organisation like NZTA to have to turn the ship, really big, slow ship, to be able to respond to that? And what is the implication for the delivery of projects that were previously forecast within the period of a hypothecated fuel tax? Because, I mean, I feel for Linda because she voted for that, but you know she needs some upside to what she voted for. But I just don't think that that's necessarily going to be able to be delivered quickly, given that the GPS doesn't necessarily lend itself to that organisation funding its half.
Well, yeah, I think. Yeah. So I just want to make one more comment. Fair enough. Look, over the CRL Limited and that, we wrote, you know, the Mayor tried hard, and we wrote again at the behest of the councillors, hey, how about you do 60-40 like Wellington? And they've come back very adamantly, no, a deal's a deal. This is what was agreed by the previous government. We ain't changing it. So that's fine. So I think we can give you the feedback that we want to focus on the ATAP, the agreed ATAP program, not the national priorities, which will blend in. But I just want to go to page 46, which is your summary, and then it's the second point under issues risks. I mean, I could interpret that several ways, but I just want to ask the question that I most want to ask, under risks, I should say. NZTA funding for Newcastle is behind budget, mainly due to the assumption the Auckland Transport Program would be funded 50-50. Is NZTA saying, oh, look, we just you spend your 50% first and then we'll give you the other 50 later? I mean, is that a wrong interpretation of what I'm reading there? Because there's several interpretations, but to me I'm reading that as, you get on with it and we'll give it to you later.
That was definitely not the intention of the comment. It's more, we have confirmed funding from AC for the coming year, and depending on the timing of the projects and what gets delivered and the available funding mechanisms and every other single hoop we have to jump through in the process, a certain amount of money will turn up from NZTA, and at the moment we're signalling it's less than the 50-50. So the uncertainty around the dollars is as important as the dollars themselves.
Yeah, so I mean, I think to a degree we can give you feedback. We might be willing to be flexible too, because again, under the CRL, the government has signalled to us that they're willing to be flexible and front load things a bit more from their funds, with us backloading them to get us past 24, which is our peak for the debt. So there is flexibility both ways, and I think we can be flexible too, if you can be flexible. All right, to wrap it up, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh no, mine was just following on from Councillor Newman, and you've already agreed you're going to give me a list, or to Council a list of the ATAP projects that have actually been commenced. And if you set aside the CRL and actually just look at the rest of the packages, the question for me strategically, and Wayne Donnelly has touched on it, is AT best for us? You know, we've put our heart and soul into ATAP, rather, but maybe there's a better way. And until we get some evidence of what we have been able to achieve, the question is going to remain. So how long do you think it will be before you can give us that breakdown of the ATAP projects that have been commenced and the status on the work that is taking place? Because I think that will be instructive on how we might convey our pleasure or displeasure to central government, because I think that there really are, been likened to constipation, but, how much Metamucil or whatever we need to be able to deliver. Right at the moment, nobody knows where you push the button to try and get progress. And we can make assumptions about problems within NZTA, but until we actually can look at the hard evidence for all of the good work that this council and AT have done to get ATAP off the ground, it's not delivering. I'd like to see what we can do to assist by way of advocacy.
Right, that's it, guys. I'm afraid we thank you for Auckland Transport, and I'm saying to councillors to be back at past, and that means we're 3/4 of an hour behind at past. So, so thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Shane, and thank you, Mark.